Welcome to NWA Cane Corsos Podcast, where we talk all things dogs.
Hey everybody, we back. Special show. Lamont Morgan, Kenny Troiano is back in the house. How you guys doing?
I'm doing good.
Doing well.
Doing great. Yep.
Good.
Well,
Good. All right. So we're gonna get right into this as usual. Breeding programs. What are you guys' definitions of a breeding program?
You want to go first?
go for it. I'll sit back and wait.
Well, breeding programs, let me think about that, how I want to say that. There's a lot of ways to breed. Some of them make progress, some of them don't. A lot of people rely on best of the best. They have breeding programs that actually don't progress the strain. I think a breeding program is one that consists, especially for chickens, consists of not just a method, but many methods in a certain order. And one that progresses the strain as they go, which starts with the consolidation of genes, because a lot of people, they're not able to get, let's say, a pure this or a pure that, or even a really good strain. They're able, most of the time, they have to go and get like a cock from one breeder and a hen from another breeder. A lot of times they're crosses or hybrids already. We call them mongrels a lot of times. And they have to start from there. And then so you have to consolidate the genes, go into a, kind of a, where the next program would be something that would actually fix or lock in the genes, and then something that progresses you into the foundation stage where actually fine tuning the strain. Most breeding programs I've seen don't do that. They go right into line breeding right away when the birds aren't even ready to be line bred. They get to a point when they hit 15, 16 or 7/8 of the blood, and then they just cross the two lines. And they wonder why they're not making progress. So I think a breeding program is a systematic program that actually progresses the strain as you go, where you can actually see the results. Breeding best of the best, these other programs, they just don't make the progress that they should be making. So, but I guess that's my definition of a program.
Okay. Lamont.
I guess my definition of a breeding program starts with the purpose. If you don't have purpose, I don't see how you have direction. Simply because if I'm trying to, on the dog side, if I'm trying to stay true to what a dog was bred for, and we're talking about breed specific, knowing your purpose behind it gives you a general direction of what am I going to do to stay true to what the dog was bred for. Following up what Kenny said, when you talk about line breeding and those type of things, knowing your lineage, it starts there. We're in the days of somebody buying a puppy. I have a male, female slapped together. I'm a breeder. And they have no direction because they don't know the lineage. They don't know the health issues. They don't know the strengths, the weaknesses. And a lot of times they just pass on simply what they got, which most of them don't know. But when I think of what I tried to do is one of the foundational things when I started, quote unquote, breeding, I didn't want to dilute it. I didn't want to dilute the lines that I was blessed to have. I wanted to strengthen them. So I went back to trying to breed the best dog with the best dog, not simply selecting a color strand or things that ultimately would dilute what that dog's temperament, strengths would be. And it could compound on the weaknesses. So when I think of a breeding program, it's a person that simply takes two pair and put them together for the strengths, not the weaknesses. If I take a female that I ultimately know has several weaknesses, and I try to put her with a male that could compound or correct those weaknesses, to me, I'm already in a diluted sense, because I know ultimately that I'm starting with less. So I know it takes generations and generations to kind of get to where you want to be, but starting out with some of the best that you possibly can gives you a better advantage of being successful in that long term. Um, and sometimes staying true to what your goal is, it means that you have to get rid of some that most people would say, "Oh, that's a great one," but in your gut, it's some things about that one that definitely doesn't need to be passed on in the lineage that I'm trying to have, especially build on for the future. If that kind of makes sense.
Yeah. I just assume, like in chickens, whatever breed you select, that already dictates the purpose of that particular bird. So you kind of already know where you're at. I think maybe dogs are a little bit different. I think our biggest obstacle is that they're so mixed up, they're so mongrelized
Mm-hmm.
that there's so much genetic diversity that we have to weed through when we start. And so a lot of people don't make the progress they should because of that genetic diversity, and they give up soon because the first results, the first offspring, kind of show that there's a problem, and so they give up a lot, always getting new birds or adding new birds to it, thinking outside blood's always going to fix the problem, instead of looking for the few offspring that actually can take them in the right direction, that actually can progress the strain, and then understanding or being able to recognize those offspring. So, because to me, the offspring tell you everything you want to know about the parents, and so I can see the difference.
It's a huge difference in dog.
Yeah.
When I think of that, a lot of people start their breeding program based off of financial gain. They don't necessarily base it. They don't necessarily base it off of. I don't care what anybody says. I know I make the best dog. It's not the color of what the business side says, what's popular, what's sellable. It's with me. I tell people when they call and they say, "Hey, do you have a black or a blue?" I say, "I have the best quality." What's your purpose for buying this? If it's black or blue, and most of them follow up with, it's for a protection dog. Well, somebody kicking your door at 2 a.m, the only color matters is the white of the teeth. That dog protecting you. It doesn't matter if it's blue or black or red or fawn or whatever it may be. But most breeders now, and we use that term lightly, their breeding programs are being based off of what can sell, not necessarily for the betterment of the breed. So, Ken, you said something that really tickled me. You said in the birds, the strand that is decided on to buy, to go forward with, usually dictates the purpose. I'm here to tell you that does not float for the dogs anymore. You have people that go and get a Malinois, who is truly a working dog, but they seen the movie, and then Malinois was on that movie, and I got to have one, and they want to turn it into a lap dog, or they want to turn it into a dog that goes to the dog park with everyone, and he's going to socialize and just be a beautiful, happy dog. And what they're doing is they're taking a dog that had a specific purpose of what it was bred for, and now they're trying to alter it to fit what they want it to be. That's what the dog world is really suffering from right now. And that's my life every day. I do a lot of behavior modification with Lapotenza, and it's simply correcting dogs that have been bought and put in a situation that they're truly not have been bred for. And now when they show what they truly are, now there's a problem. And Lamont, I can't believe he growled at my neighbor. but you went and got a guardian breed.
Yeah.
So those are things that the dog world, unfortunately, is swamped with right now. That's breeding dogs is a new hustle. It's definitely a huge scam now. And people take it and they run with it, unfortunately. But if we had more breeders that said, that's not the purpose of these dogs. I'm going to hit X, Y, and Z because this is what truly will better it. I don't care if I have to pass on 15 people that didn't buy him. He's going to eventually find the right home. He's going to eventually find a home that has the purpose of what I bred him for. And we don't have that in a lot of the culture of today when it comes to the dog world. The ones that can stand on it and don't mind feeding that puppy an extra 3 weeks, extra, 4 weeks till it finds the correct home, are becoming far and few. I think
ours is different. Yeah.
I think you can attest to that, Joe.
Oh yeah. You'll see 8 weeks. Personally, 8 weeks, I want them gone. Like any breeder would want them gone by 8 weeks. But you will see when they don't move like that, boy. And then too, like the funny thing about it, they don't even prep to get the dogs moved. They had a litter, and then they just posted. No one knows who you are. You hadn't worked on any kind of marketing. Then what you do with those dogs when you can't sell them? They 12 weeks. You know what I mean?
Right.
So there's some business acumen we got too on.
I have a question. This might be a little awkward. Kenny, in the bird world, do you have a lot of importing from other countries?
No, hardly any. Exporting, but not importing. It's really hard to bring birds into the United States from other countries, especially with the diseases that are out there. Mm-hmm.
Even Mexico?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because of the Newcastle's disease. Yeah. Gotcha. If they're bringing them from Mexico, they're smuggling them here. I mean, they're kind of hiding them and getting them here that way. And that's maybe how we got Newcastle's recently, is that they kind of snuck them in.
That's definitely not the case with the dog world.
Right. Yeah. Oh, boy.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. We can ship them in.
Import. And but I'm sorry, Joe, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're good. No, I was gonna ask Kenny about more so in the chicken world, what y'all deal with. Is it mostly like they're not even specific breeds like the dogs we deal with, like a Corso? It's just a bunch of mixed birds.
Well, it's not supposed to be like that, but it turns out, especially in the game fowl world, that's exactly what's happening because they don't really understand the breed. They don't understand how to breed or select to a standard. So they think by the way of improving it is by adding other breeds into the American game, like ASIL. They think ASIL is going to improve them. The Peruvian breed, they're trying to add those to it. They think by breeding in a breed and then thinking that they can breed it out, like we call it the 1/16th infusion method, where you breed, let's say, ASIL into American game, and then over many generations you breed it out to the point when you only have 1/16th of the ASIL left in it. But they don't really understand when you look at the genetic factors, it doesn't work like that. Because as soon as you bring that ASIL in, all you've done is recombinate the genes. And when you look at the process of meiosis and the crossover event, you realize that all you did was recombinate the gene. So it's not about having a certain percentage of a breed or a certain percentage of someone's name in it. You just got a mixed blood, which we call mongrel. And it's really tough to get to these breeders and get them to understand that it just doesn't work like that. And you were asking if we import birds. There is it's called Greenfire Farms. I think they're in Georgia or something. And they do actually import breeds from like Europe and places like that. But it's a process. You got to quarantine them. It's kind of risky. It's expensive, but not a whole lot of that. Most of what's brought into the United States is smuggled. But yeah.
A lot of the importing on the dog side can be beneficial and it can be detrimental. And I talked to a guy. He called me. Matter of fact, 2 days ago, he said that, well, Lamont, I know you have some proven lines. He said, but I prefer to import. I said, okay. I said, can I, just simply ask you why? He said, well, it's more pure. The blood is. I said, okay. How do you know? He said, well, because my paperwork shows it. And I really got tickled then. I said, well, let me ask you this. I said, if you were a breeder in the United States and someone called you in Australia and they said, hey, I want X, Y, and Z. I said, as a breeder in the United States, would you send your best dog to Australia? He said, no. I said, okay. So you just told me that the breeder you selected, he sent you one of his best dogs. I said, why would he? I said, with that being said, have you seen? I said, have you seen the parents? Well, I got pictures of them. I said, have you seen the grandparents? Have you seen the temperaments? Have you seen the great-great-grandparents? I said, have you seen any of his lineage besides him? He said, no. I said, so there's my point of why I don't import to improve my program. I said, call me country, call me old school, whatever you may be. I like to put my hands on them. I like to see them. I like to be able to shake the person's hand that I might be considering bringing in another line. I said, and I want to talk to them face to face. I said, that's just what I choose to do because I want to ensure that I have the best chance of improving versus diluting what I've already worked for 20 years. I said, and that's just the truth. I said, I help a lot of people get started with dogs. I said, and under no circumstance will I sell them anything that I wouldn't keep. If I keep it, you want it because I'm going to keep the best for myself. And if I'm willing to serve a bigger purpose in that's helping you get started, that it's what it's supposed to be, because if I keep it, it has to be check all the boxes. So after our conversation, he kind of understood that he probably didn't get the best dog from that breeder, because logically it doesn't make sense. When you have no relationship and you send him a message on Facebook, he's not going to ultimately turn around and say, he's such a good guy, I'm going to send him my best dog.
Right. Yeah, it don't work like that.
Yeah, I'd be very suspicious if someone said they're sending their best stuff, because if I have my best stuff, I need that to advance my strain. We may not import birds, but we do ship birds all over the country, and I'm always discouraging people from doing that because it's like you said, we never know what's going to come out of that box. And I've seen some big-time breeders, well-known breeders, send some what I would call crap. I mean, these birds, they have poor condition, poor conformation of body. Their tails are like leaning to the side. It's like, wow, these guys are supposed to be really good breeders, and this is what they're sending people. If they don't think you're anybody, or you're just a beginner, or you're never going to come back, you can almost guarantee they're not going to give you anything good. Right. So I'm like Javon is. I would rather go there, and if they'll let you on your farm, and see the birds in person, check out the condition of the farm, the condition of the birds, see what kind of medications they're using, if any, how they select, how they talk about their breeding process, get the birds in your hand and really look them over. I would never buy. I've done it in the past. I bought birds through the mail, and I'll tell you, they weren't that great. You know what I mean? So,
and I have to say this, I don't want to discourage people from doing it that way, because we all know it's more than one right way. It's more than one way to be successful. So I don't want to be like so many of the people I see trolling sites and say, well, this is the only way and it's the best way. And if you don't do it this way, you're not doing it right. When I think of things as like a breeder, that's where I'm speaking from. I'm not necessarily speaking from a pet owner. A pet owner, they're looking for something totally different than what I'm looking for. They're looking for a companion, good temperament, not necessarily great in conformation. They're looking at something that I don't want to say is subpar, but they're definitely okay with accepting something that a breeder shouldn't, if that makes sense. As a breeder, I'm supposed to have a standard that surpasses a pet owner. And the way I wake up every day is I want my pet owners to have something in their home that I could always go back to. We know that doesn't always happen, but the standard that I set for myself, I want their product to be just as good as what I have on my yard. Because that lets me know that my standards that I set for myself and what I'm sending out is above average and superior to most. So I wanted to stop it because I was almost sounding like a Karen. And that's not what I want to do. Because the world we live in, it's my way or it's wrong. And there's so many other ways. There are local people that are doing great jobs that, people, and I'm speaking from the dog industry. There are people that are starting out that are first time breeders that are really trying to do it right. And I don't want to discredit them because they might use a different method. I want to simply say that if you're spending X amount of dollars, it's okay to go the next step to double check on the product that you're actually going out to buy, whether it's a bird or an elephant or 2 snakes. It's okay to simply go a little step further and research that person, talk to that person, and just ensure that, number one, you're not getting scammed, and 2, that you're actually getting what you're paying for.
Yeah. And then too, Lamont, I want to add something on what you were saying. We got health guarantees on our dogs. Right. When you go overseas, you stopped me one time. I was thinking like that. You said, wait a minute, man. No. But to me personally, going over getting specifically the breed we deal with, a Cane Corso overseas, really don't make good sense nowadays to me, because it's so many of them here. The Italian lines already here. These guys done had them, and once you send that money overseas, if something don't work out, you're not.
What you gonna do? Go beat them?
They're gonna replace the puppy. Guess what? That's gonna be another almost $2,000 to ship it back over here.
Right.
So that's like getting a Corso overseas. To me, right now, it's like somebody shipping over a pit bulldog. The dog is pretty common in America now, brother.
Right. You're absolutely right. It gets redundant in a sense, but the thing about the people that I know, the breeders over there, what they say about us in America is send it to them because they just want something different. They want to be able to say they have something different, and in our eyes, different is better. And that's not always the case, because they feel they can send their trash to America and America will buy it because of our market. We have a larger market.
Yeah. And then the whole exotic, it's from overseas,
That word, hey, boy, it's became a wonderful, terrible word. Exotic.
Right.
Javon said something that's interesting, that it must be different in the chicken world. He was saying there's more than one way to do something. There's no one way to do something, that there's other ways, and everybody has their own method. In the chicken world, it's funny, is most of what people do are driven by old wives' tales and superstitions, things that aren't based on science. A lot of it doesn't make sense, but they don't know better. They figured just because everybody else is doing it that way, they're supposed to, even though they're not getting results. So that's the battle I've been finding. That I'm in, is that I understand there's more than one way to do something, but the ways they are doing it is wrong. It's just not going to get them where they want to go. So, and there's some so-called high authorities out there that have their own shows, their own books. They're big-time breeders, are well-known, promoting this stuff. And we, me and my co-host, we believe that these people know the truth. They know what's right. They know what's wrong, but they're still promoting the same old thing, even though because they know that the customer, that's what they want to hear. They use names. Those names haven't existed for years, but they still use them. They put percentages with them when it's not really the percentage of the blood, but the level of purity they should be considered with. So I understand that there's more ways to do something, but the ways are you doing is wrong in the chicken world, and we fight that all the time. Yeah.
Well, it's the same in I think most worlds. If you bring horse breeders on, the power of the internet. The power of the internet gives people the opportunity to research things, and anybody can put anything on the internet. And unfortunately, it becomes the gospel. If I read it and I seen it on the internet 3 times, it's got to be the gospel. Joe, remember I did a video about eggshells.
Yeah.
You don't understand how many calls I got and messages about contradicting what I said about eggshells. So, Kenny, to fill you in, I said, don't feed your dogs eggshells because they don't break down. Well, most people have read on the internet, give them an egg for protein. Okay. I never said don't give them the egg for protein. I said the eggshell because clearly it's a protector of what's inside. It's the membrane that's on the shell that has the nutritional value, not the shell. So when I said don't feed the eggshell, because it went against so many things that they've read on the internet. So I asked them, I said, when your dog uses the bathroom, does the shell come out? Yes. What nutritional value did it have besides cutting up intestines, possibly lacerating stomach, those kind of things? That's why I said that, because I went to the vet with a friend and he fought me on it for years about the egg. It's simple to say crack and put the egg in there and throw the shell out, right? Well, he had a female that he had about 30,000 in. She was rushed to the hospital for C-section because she was having issues. Well, when the vet opened her up, guess what she was full of? Eggshells. Every sack to every puppy had been lacerated with, guess what? Eggshells. So he not only lost his litter, he lost his female as well behind a carton of eggs. And that's why I made the video, because most people are misinformed, as you said. And there's a lot of people, they will repeat it because it makes them seem knowledgeable. It makes people trust them. It makes people follow their way of doing things. And now I get a subscriber, or I get a person that's going to come and purchase something from me. And if it logically doesn't make sense, it probably isn't right.
You would think, but most people don't see the difference. You know what I mean? Right. Not in the chicken world, anyways.
Yeah.
I got a question. This one for you, Lamont. So you hear a lot of people who probably been in the dog breeding game a little while. You say, I understand, know how to read the pedigree. Read the pedigree. Could you go over what that means? And how could you if you don't know dogs?
Okay. Why you can get this to Kenny?
Yeah, I will.
Mine's easy.
I know. I think I know what Kenny's gonna say.
So when it came to pedigrees, I'll just tell you how I started, because when I started, they didn't do pedigrees. They didn't do papers. The old man told you what it was off of. It was off of so-and-so, who was off of so-and-so, who was off of da-da-da-da-da. And they went on down the line because they knew the lineage. And it wasn't always put on paper. it was passed down. So when I did start to get dogs whose pedigree was put on paper, back then there was no internet. So how did you do your research? You researched it through people who knew the pedigree or they knew the dog per se. This person would tell you, well, Kenny owned him. Kenny owned him and his daddy. So who did I call? Kenny. And Kenny gave me a story. Now, I'm not saying Kenny's stories were true, but that's all I had to go on. So now you have the databases, you have DNA testing, you have those things that can help you learn and follow your pedigree. Now, we didn't have those when I started. When they became available, some older heads didn't want to be bothered with them. They didn't want to participate in them. They were content with passing them information the way that it was. Me, I don't have to study pedigrees so much because I do a lot of line breeding. So I know the dogs. I've worked the dogs. If I didn't work them, I knew who had them and I knew who worked them. So me reading a pedigree for someone is definitely different than me reading my own pedigrees, if that makes sense.
Right. So, and then I know, we don't talk to customers the same way we talk to each other. So
Right.
even with defects, you would know the defects in the line, say, hey, watch that. When you put this together, blah, blah, blase, correct?
An officer from Dallas Police Department brought his dog yesterday for training. He brought his paperwork with him. He handed it to me. He said, hey, Lamont, he said, here's her pedigree. Because the dog got out the car and ran under the car. So I was reading his pedigree while he was trying to fish his pup from up under the car. When I handed it back to him, the only thing I said was, I hope you got a health guarantee because in your lineage, there's epilepsy and severe hip dysplasia.
Mm-hmm.
Because I knew several of the dogs in the lineage on his pedigree. He didn't have a clue because he's a pet owner. He was given the pedigree at the time of the purchase. And that's what his breeder did. He didn't tell him that those dogs that some of them had champion next to their name have been put to sleep because of epilepsy.
Mm-hmm.
So to a consumer buying it, it's almost kind of unfair,
Mm-hmm.
because the breeder who usually have those dogs aren't clearly going to tell people that I have issues in my lines.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
reading a pedigree for a breeder versus a pet owner, and I think that's the difference between like what I do versus maybe some of the issues Kenny might have. There's not many individuals just buying one bird, just to say I have a bird. Then again, some I might be wrong. Some people might, but when it comes to a dog, you have a situation to where a pedigree could help them in doing the research. I know some people ask, hey, Lamont, can you send me your pedigree before I purchase the dog because they want to research it. I'm not big on sending my pedigree over the internet because people have stole my pedigree offline, and there was a lady in North Carolina that was running a full kennel under my name, because I wasn't an internet guy and I just didn't know not to put my paperwork online like that, at that time. So I always tell them this, I'll invite you out. And not only do I invite them out to show them dogs, check temperaments, work a dog if you want to, then I'll sit down with you with my papers, my health testing, those kind of things in front of you. And now we can talk about it. And I can explain to you some of the breeders that are on there. You can feel free to leave and contact them and go from there before you purchase from me.
Gotcha. So, and you've been attached to some of the forefathers of the Corso. It ain't a lot of guys got 26 in. You know what I mean?
26 rough ones. No.
Yeah. What? How different was that dog of yesteryear compared to today?
Majority of them have been bred down to be more socially acceptable.
So they was hotter.
They were definitely a harder dog in the 90s, even in the early 2000s. Because back then you didn't hear, of course, so doing much but maybe protection. You know, you didn't see them called to do much more than that. So they were bred for that. But then they became beautiful in people's eyes. And then unfortunately, when AKC started recognizing them in 2010, they become very popular because they was, you know, Westminster and, you know, those kind of things. And they became high value on the show circuit. And they started to be bred down so they could fit in the show ring. Now the judge can touch them. Whereas when the judge went to touch a Corso in 2000, 2001, it was a little more tricky. You know, the owner the owner handler or whatever it may have been, definitely had to show you the teeth. You weren't reaching up to that dog. I've been doing this on any Corso. So how does it compare? Definitely can probably serve more purpose today for what a person's want may be. Is that necessarily a good thing? How I train every day and all the behavior modifications I have to do on a weekly basis doesn't say that, because so many issues I feel have been enhanced in how they're being bred now. Skittish, being a skittish dog, lack of confidence is definitely probably at the forefront of what I see now with the Corso. But they're big. They have the right color, the popular colors. But unfortunately, some of the main characteristics that made that a great breed have definitely been stepped on.
Mm-hmm.
Am I saying the ones in the 90s and early 2000s were better? No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is they lined up more for what the Corso was bred for and what it was truly traditionally.
You mentioned line breeding, Kenny. What does line breeding look like in a chicken world? And after that, Javon, will you explain what it looks like in the dog world?
Yeah, I've been following videos on dog breeding, and they talk about line breeding, and it's much different than the way we do it. Ours is pretty simple, actually. We find the bird that we feel is worthy of cloning, okay, that's free of defects, is healthy, it represents its breed, has everything we're looking for, and we basically just simply breed to its daughter. We look at the offspring, get the best offspring from that, breed him again to his granddaughter, then to his great granddaughter. And we try to go as far as we can until we start seeing a problem. And every time I've seen it explained on the dog world, it seems more complicated. It doesn't even look for me, it doesn't even look like line breeding. But that's basically how we do it. We're just basically trying to get as close to that common ancestor, the one we're trying to clone, the one we like, as possible. So when we reach 15, 16s or 7, 8s, we hope that his great grandson resembles him quite closely. You know, that he's got the phenotype, but hopefully he has the genotype that follows. So, and then we can move forward from there. We're trying not only to replicate him, but we're trying to fine tune the family as we go. So it's pretty simple, actually. The actual process of line breeding,
right?
Can be simple if that's what, depending on what you're shooting for. It does look a little different. Like one thing that's frowned upon in the dog world is taking a daddy to a daughter. a grandfather to a granddaughter is more acceptable, simply because I think people look at it in a human aspect. And I think some of them convince themselves that there's incest versus line breeding. You took it to his daughter? Yeah, took it to his daughter. But the goal of line breeding, I've always been taught, was to keep the best characteristics and not import other lines that could diminish the lines that you loved and that you wanted to take forward. So in the dog breeding, what I found when it comes to line breeding, it can be a standard set, but it fluctuates from breed to breed. In the pit bull world, where I started with, it was okay to take mother to son, father to daughter, keeping it really, really close. That's what a lot of the old breeders did. Then, as time went on, when you look at the shepherds, even the Corso, the males, the golden retrievers and Labradors, and the working dogs, they decided that they would skip a generation, and they would take that grandmother to grandson or uncle to niece, those kind of things, and they would try to give a generation maybe in between before they would take them back. One thing I love to see is, I'll probably get in trouble for this, a half brother to a half sister, maybe with the common dad in between. If you find one that those two have superior qualities and you can line them up, they make tremendous, awesome dogs. But what you have is people that don't necessarily take the time to go generation to generation to generation to generation, because I believe the dogs take longer than the chickens. Each dog, you're talking about a 2-year process of seeing what that dog truly turns into, before you take it back to anything. Whereas in the chicken, there's a shorter time frame that you can do this, to try to figure it out. So when you talk about taking a true line and line breeding it, you might be 12 or 14 years in before you really can see some of the production. Taking Vulcan, I see it in one of his grandsons. 6 years down the line, now that you can see it in his grandson because you've worked him. Now, what do you decide to take him with? So the line breeding in the dog world is a little slower. The decision making time. I guess we're blessed, Kenny, a little, at times to be able to have the time to make the right decision, versus you guys, with a shorter time frame.
Well, I think the biggest problem is is that if we followed your way, the way the dogs do it, we would never reach a state of uniformity or consistency. We would never get there. And also, I think maybe you guys feel like you have to, because mammal genetics is quite different than bird genetics. It's reversed. We can actually do a lot of inbreeding and get away with it, where you guys would see the detrimental sides of inbreeding depression. And I see so many people, they're confusing in the chicken world, that is, confusing line breeding to back crossing. They think just going to the daughter, father to daughter, mother to son, is line breeding, whereas it's not. It's back crossing, especially when we're dealing with the kind of birds that we're dealing with in the chicken world, especially the game fowl world, where they're mostly dealing with hybrids. They're mostly dealing with mongrels. And so when we're breeding this parent to his hybrid offspring, that's back crossing when they think it's line breeding. But we can actually do a lot of inbreeding and get away with it that you guys can't get away with, and we would never. Yeah, we want to do that. You know what I mean? And we can get away with it. If we didn't use line breeding or even inbreeding, we would never reach the state of uniformity and consistency and repeatability that we look for. You know, I don't know if that's something that you guys don't look for, or it's just something you got to work around. And if we do in and inbreeding, you're talking about uncle to niece and aunt to uncle, aunt to nephew and cousin to cousin and half brother and half sister. We call that in and inbreeding. We would never make progress doing it that way. We try to avoid that. I mean, you can maintain, once you have an established line, you can maintain it, but you don't really make progress breeding that way. You really do need to dig in deep to the inbreeding part of it and the line breeding part of it to really see the progress that we're looking for.
Being that we deal with a specific breed, is there even any time that we need to be inbreeding? Being that we, you know,
well, let's put it this way: Robert Bakewell, back in the 1700s, he was a British agriculturalist. He's the one that actually brought the science in breeding. We call him the father of selective breeding. And he wasn't even a chicken breeder. He bred horses, he bred sheep, he bred cattle. Okay. And he said then, even, and we followed ever since, that you cannot create a breed. You cannot create a variety. You cannot breed or create a strain if there's not any inbreeding in there at all. You have to have some inbreeding to actually create the breed. So even the breeds you have now, there had to be some sort of inbreeding that took place for you to get to where you are now. Now, I see the breeders in the dog world are very afraid of that. I actually don't think they should be. You know, I actually think they can get away with more inbreeding than they think they can. You know, and they probably make better progress. It's just getting past that fear and then looking at the offspring and seeing and be able to recognize when there's a problem or not, and then knowing whether to go forward or not. But I do believe that some inbreeding and some line breeding has to happen to not only create the strain, but actually improve it along the way, you know? Yeah. So when I see these videos, what's that?
I would agree. I would definitely agree with you. That's not something that I'm scared of, but you hit it on it when you said most breeders are, and I think it goes back to so much focus on the registration. You bred the daddy to the daughter. Mm-hmm. Because most people don't understand what as a breeder, what your purpose is and what you're trying to do and why they have the superior product that they have. It took some work, and it doesn't always line up with what is acceptable to the public. Right. Because it's an art, I feel. Well, yeah. Most art doesn't make sense to most. Right. Yeah, it doesn't. But I know that there's been a lot of inbreeding to simply make the lines better. But it also has been a lot of line breeding and inbreeding that has been detrimental too, because if you take two dogs that aren't superior and they have a lot of flaws, you double up on them. Yeah, that's why you see a lot of the underbite in the Corso world now that you didn't used to see, is because they're breeding really, really close, and that's just a genetic that is hard to breed out. You know, a characteristic that's hard to breed out. So what Kenny was saying, it really, really makes a lot of sense, not just in the bird side of things, but, you know, in the dogs as well. You just have to be able to, number one, know what you're doing, know what you're shooting for, and know how to get there. But it takes some trial and error. When I started with my kennel partners, I told them you'll be able to see what you're looking for and what you really want within about 15 to 20 years.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. They know, don't be. I said no.
Well, you know, and we say that inbreeding is a great tool when used properly, but if you don't understand inbreeding, then don't do it. You know, because you're right. If you're inbreeding the wrong birds and you're doing, you know, for the wrong length of time or whatever, you can actually ruin them. And if you're inbreeding birds or even line breeding birds with faults, you are going to double up on them. You know, you are going to actually get it to where they're expressed. So I never tell people just haphazardly inbreed. I do believe you have to do it right, you know, and understand the process, you know. So you try to find the best dog for you, the best dogs possible, you know, that actually match each other and represent their breed. Okay, they don't have to be related when you're starting out. We call them the Adam and the Eve. The seed, and chickens is our seed fowl, the Adam and Eve. And then we breed them together and we look at the offspring. And the offspring tell us what we need to do. So we look at the offspring and say, okay, are they better than their parents? Do they represent their breed? Do they have what they're looking for? Are they at least as good or better than the parents? And if they're not, because I don't believe that you're never going to get anywhere if you're always bringing in new blood thinking it's going to fix you. Okay, unless they're really bad and really off, then you got to do something. But if they're close, they just need a little more from the parents, and we would do a back cross. Okay, and then once we get the offspring we're looking for that actually better than the parents, then for me, I would say pick the best brother and sister, do the inbreeding so that we can lock in those genes, fixate those genes, start getting prepared for the line breeding process. And then once we do the inbreeding, and I try, even in chickens, I don't tell them to just keep inbreeding over and over and over again. When you get the uniformity you're looking for, then you stop the inbreeding and then you move on to the line breeding, and then it's time to clone that bird. And I've been working with dog breeders, and we've been doing the same thing with them, and it's working out really good,
So, Kenny, can I ask you a question? What's
Sure.
your opinion when it comes to the dog side of things? Right now, what's popular in not just the Corso breed, but dogs in general is color. So one thing about where you can make a huge mistake when it comes to dogs is breeding a color that's a dilute. So they love the gray. Well, what you find is people, they have gray. They breed a generation after generation after generation, and then they wonder why, wham, all of a sudden now I'm having skin issues because I bred dilute to dilute to dilute. But it's a popular color. At the end of the day, to most people, it's a financial, gain. But in the chicken world, with the inbreeding, the way that you guys do it, do you ever see people gearing towards a certain color that ends up to come back and dilute the chicken or make the chicken itself worse?
Actually, in the chicken world, in the game fowl world, they don't pay enough attention to color. Where you have the domestic chickens where they pay too much attention to color. Okay. Now, the only time, it's not actually for us, color is the easiest thing to breed for and fix. Unless we're looking at a dominant trait, and if we don't pay attention to it and we're careless, then we could actually lose that trait. But if it's a recessive trait, we don't have to worry. We can fix it at any time, that kind of thing. The problem is people get into blues for chickens when it's a incomplete dominant trait, and they're confused because they can't perfect the color that you get every color under the sun. So I would think in dogs, just from an outsider's view, is that color shouldn't even be, in most cases, a concern. That it's the breed itself, it's the conformation of the dog, and that kind of thing. But I know that some people, they buy their animals based on the color. As a breeder, I probably wouldn't even worry about that. Yeah. I think there's other things that they need to be concerned with more. Right. Is that wrong for you guys?
It's my philosophy. Excuse me. It's my philosophy. I don't base things off of color. I take whatever color God gives me, and I make sure the quality supersedes that. But that's not Joe will confirm this. That is not the world that we live in now, especially in the Corso world. I could probably pull up my phone and I get at least 5 to 10 messages a day.
Black or blue?
Facebook. Black or blue. Black or blue, because if you Google Corso right now, those are the colors that come up. Black or blue. So most people think if I don't get a black or blue, I'm not getting a Corso, because they know no difference. And that's the unfortunate part, but it's true. Most of today's world in our breed is being based off of color, not genetics, not size per se, not intelligence. They don't ask about the temperament. They don't ask about what the parents were. They ask for the color. Can I ask you a question? What's your
Sure.
opinion when it comes to the dog side of things? Right now, what's popular in not just the Corso breed, but dogs in general is color. So one thing about where you can make a huge mistake when it comes to dogs is breeding a color that's a dilute. So they love the gray. Well, what you find is
Yep.
people, they have gray, gray, gray. They breed generation after generation after generation, and then they wonder why, wham, all of a sudden now I'm having skin issues because I've bred dilute to dilute to dilute, but it's a popular color. At the end of the day, to most people, it's a financial, gain. But in the chicken world, with the inbreeding, the way that you guys do it, do you ever see people gearing towards a certain color that ends up to come back and dilute the chicken or make the chicken itself worse?
Actually, in the chicken world, in the game fowl world, they don't pay enough attention to color. Where you have the domestic chickens where they pay too much attention to color. Okay. Now, the only time, it's not actually for us, color is the easiest thing to breed for and fix. Unless we're looking at a dominant trait, and if we don't pay attention to it and we're careless, then we could actually lose that trait. But if it's a recessive trait, we don't have to worry. We can fix it at any time, that kind of thing. The problem is people get into blues for chickens when it's a incomplete dominant trait, and they're confused because they can't perfect the color that you get every color under the sun. So I would think in dogs, just from an outsider's view, is that color shouldn't even be, in most cases, a concern. That it's the breed itself, it's the conformation of the dog, and that kind of thing. But I know that some people, they buy their animals based on the color. As a breeder, I probably wouldn't even worry about that.
Yeah.
I think there's other things that they need to be concerned with more.
Right.
Is that wrong for you guys?
It's my philosophy. Excuse me. It's my philosophy. I don't base things off of color. I take whatever color God gives me, and I make sure the quality supersedes that. But that's not Joe will confirm this. That is not the world that we live in now, especially in the Corso world. I could probably pull up my phone and I get at least 5 to 10 messages a day.
Black or blue?
Facebook, black or blue. Black or blue,
Mm-hmm.
because if you Google Corso right now, those are the colors that come up, black or blue. So most people think if I don't get a black or blue, I'm not getting a Corso, because they know no difference. And that's the unfortunate part, but it's true. Most of today's world in our breed is being based off of color, not genetics, not size per se, not intelligence. They don't ask about the temperament. They don't ask about what the parents were. They ask for the color. Color.
Mm-hmm.
If you say you have that color, there you go. You got
Well, I think that's the responsibility of the breeder there, so that when they do call you, you need to educate them about that. And if they just don't follow you, they don't believe it or whatever, then that's not your customer. That's how I look at it.
Right. I had a lady out here a couple of weeks ago, and that's what she was asking for. And she came out, and once she saw the dogs out, she kind of changed her mind on it, because she seen that pretty puppy with that adrenaline, with the sun hitting it, and you check it, and she saw the structures of the dog. And that's when I kind of told her, I said, it ain't all about color; it's about more the construction, and giving the dog obedience commands, and she's seeing how smart the dogs is. So yeah, it is kind of up to us to educate them. So, Kenny, we're gonna go into biosecurity for a second. So us dog breeders, me and Lamont, we have people at our homes come by and look at the dogs. On chicken farms, you advise against it. Can you give us some reasons why?
I do overall, but if you want to bring someone on your yard, then go through the process of, bleaching their shoes and all that kind of thing and making sure they're okay. I do think whenever you breed people on your yard, you're running the risk of exposing your birds to disease. Okay, because the diseases in chickens is rapid, and it doesn't take much for them to get it. It can be blown in from the air. You know what I mean? It can be tracked on the shoes, and if birds are actually walking around on the yard, it can actually pick it up and then pass it to another chicken. There's a lot of diseases out there. Some of them are pretty bad. Laryngotracheitis will ruin your strain, destroy it. Obviously, AI and Newcastle's disease, but and then there's just some that are a pain in the ass that once you get them, you wish you never did, like mycoplasma and coryza and things like that, bronchitis. So for me, it's not worth it to bring someone on my yard and take the chance of exposing my birds to these kind of diseases. So I wouldn't even do it. But I do tell my customers and my members that if you can get on their yard, try to do that, because I would encourage you to pick them up and see the birds in person before you buy them, instead of taking the chance of bringing them through the mail. But yeah, I don't want to seem wishy-washy about the whole thing or contradictory, but I do believe that for the most part, keeping people off your yard, practicing good biosecurity is the best approach. But I could see where that would be impossible for you guys to do, because people do need to pick them up. They need to come and check them out, and they need to pick them up and see if it's something they want to do or want to buy. But yeah, I've seen some good families ruin because they took the chance of bringing. Here's a good example, and I don't know how I got out of it, but it was back in 2003, I think it was. A person was going to buy some chickens from me. He was going to buy a bunch of them too, and we have him back his truck into my backyard. He opens it up and there's a bunch of roosters and stuff in there. I'm going, oh, shoot, where'd these come from? He goes, I just came from Mexico. Okay. And I'm like, oh, crap. So I'm like, okay, let's just get this over with. Let's get him this chicken. So he put them in there. He took off. And then he calls me, it might have been that night or the next day, and says, hey, are your chickens sick? I go, no, why? And he goes, because mine are just dropping dead over here. And right after that is when the Newcastle disease took off and was destroying farms left and right. I had that Newcastle disease in my backyard, and luckily I didn't pass it to the rest of my birds. I dodged a real bullet on that one, So, yeah, you really take a chance, and they do it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I don't do, when you got your puppies reserved, you have those people, especially if they local. Oh, can I come by and just check them out? No, not ready. You know what I'm saying? And even with my kids, like, they'd like to handle them. They got a cold or anything like that. Excuse me. I don't let them, So before it's visiting, Lamont, you can take off on that if you want, bro.
Well, it's been tricky on my end because Kenny, I train as well. So I constantly have dogs coming in. And I suffered a major, major blow earlier this year. Parvo.
Mm-hmm.
A gentleman brought a dog in for training. The dog, when I had pups out and I was walking the dog to the boarding facility, and she started to throw up. So, of course, what did the puppies run and do? They ran and started trying to eat the throw up. I got him away, and I took the dog back to him. I said, hey, man, she's throwing up. I said, he had his shot records. I can't say he didn't. I required him to bring the shot records. Everything was up to date. He said, well, I thought she was just kind of sick on her way over here on the car ride. He took her. I said, well, take her to the vet, have her checked out, and kind of let me know. I didn't hear back from him. Well, I called him in about 3 days. He said the dog died at the vet. I said, from what? He said, from parvo. So now, I'm looking at my pups and they start to get sick. Long story short, I lost countless puppies and several adults. And it was heartbreaking because, these pups were older. They were ready to go home. Families had selected them, prepared for them, and then take that away. Now it's in your yard. Parvo can live in the dirt for about 10 years. And what we have in Texas is this. We had no rain this year for, I believe we went over 100 plus days of 100 plus degrees, no rain.
Wow.
So, yeah, over 100 plus days. Okay, it went over 100 degrees over 100 days. So what that does is that dries out the ground to where the ground is cracked. It's like an earthquake that's went through your yard. All right, the parvo's in there. So when we got that big rain, what do you think people started running to the vet about? They were having parvo because it just went down in the dirt and it washed it back up. Now you have dogs that had no issues being reinfected, or something along that line. So of course, me knowing how the process worked, I'm spraying my yard, I'm whizzy washing, I'm doing all these things because now it's in my yard whether I want it to be or not. I'm making sure everybody's vaccinated ×2 and so on and so on. So there are definitely pros and cons to having people come to your yard. Where I get into allowing people to come is I pride myself on the temperaments. I pride myself on showing the minds of my dogs. That's hard for people to see over the phone. I can tell them everything under the sun, but when they see it, it's usually a confirmation. And most of my dogs go to family homes. So what I do is I encourage families to bring their children. Don't leave those babies at home. Bring them. And then you'll see how my dogs, interact with them. It's usually in a certain area of my yard that's not necessarily right where my kennels are. I have 7.5 acres. I have several dogs that run my property all day, every day. And those are the dogs that usually meet people that when they come. So they get to see what a dog that is a protector is like with your family. An intelligent protector, not a loose cannon. So I think that's probably why I do it the way I do it. I have guys that I know that you can't set foot in their yard. No shape, form, or fashion. Whether you bought a puppy from them or not, they're going to meet you at a safe location. And it's not because they don't want you to know where they live. It's because they don't want anything to be brought into their yard. Now, under no circumstance does anyone go in my nursery for me and my children. They don't go in my boarded facilities because I don't allow them to do that for the same reason, Kenny, that you don't allow it. And that's because on your shoes, you could transport something in there that could be detrimental to what's in there. So it is pros and cons to it. We go back to that. Well, it's more than one right way. It's just depending on who you are and what standards you set for yourself and the public. Me, I'm okay with families coming out because of the breed that I had. Now, if I had Yorkies, you probably couldn't come out because their temperaments aren't really much different. They're going to be little buttholes, and they're just what it is. You know what I mean? But given the families, and like I said, I deal with mostly families, giving them a sense of security, of knowing what they're bringing into their homes as a family member. I take the risk. God has covered me for a long time. That's one incident I can give you, but that was someone bringing in a training dog. So, I do group trainings. I have people out all the time. The training aspect definitely brings more people, more dogs in, at different times. So it's not always a good call, and it's a chance you take. And at least I know I'm gonna be honest and say that, it's not all peaches and cream. You definitely take. But this is what I learned a long time ago. I have 3 yards. I don't have all my dogs on 1 yard. So my other 2 yards, nobody goes to those yards. If that makes sense.
Oh yeah.
You know, my main yard that's at my homestead, people come there. But my other 2 yards, and Joe, I've told you this several times. Kenny, he teases me that I always hide dogs.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, okay, where this one come from? You know.
He always says, well, he hides dogs. But Kenny, I think you can bounce it. Good breeders will never show you everything.
No, that was a problem. Despite, just forget biosecurity for one, is when people would come to buy birds, when I did let them on my yard, that was the problem. They always wanted to buy the birds I didn't want to sell. You know, they didn't. Right. So what I started doing was the ones for sale would be in a staging area, and they would never see my brood fowl. You know what I mean? Right. They would only see the birds I wanted to sell. So, and then it got to where I just hated people coming over in general just because of that and biosecurity. So then I partnered up with someone who I basically sent him all my extra birds, and then he sold them for me, and then we split the money, and that worked out for a while, you know. But I hate selling birds, and I hate people coming on my farm, so that was the way we dealt with it for a while.
Well, I have visitors pretty much. I'm sorry, Lamont. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, brother. I was just saying, I always keep something in my secret laboratory.
Yeah, but I tell you, I have another type visitor that comes around a lot. It's more of an environmental thing. I have armadillos across the yard a lot, possums.
Yeah,
you know, things like that, mice, things like that. I have to, and then I want to say something too, like just the cleaning business part of me, y'all. When you guys use that disinfectant, I'm talking to the public now. It's a such thing as a kill time. That disinfectant has to remain wet most of the time, 15 minutes. You can read the back of the bottle. So if you spray the yard in the heat of the day, it's not gonna work. The best time to spray that yard is when when the dew is on the grass early in the morning, so it can maintain that 15-minute hold time. That's when it does the killing of and read the bottle, look for things that says specifically for parvo. I use the stuff specifically got a claim of killing parvo, and then bleaching water been around for a long time, huh, too, Lamont?
It has, and I think that's most people go to. There's some stuff now called Wizzy Wash that it kills more than just parvo. It's a disinfectant that kills several different agents that could affect probably your birds or dogs as well. It served me pretty well. I know a lot of kennels that use it, but you're using some stuff because of the cleaning company that we probably don't necessarily have access to.
Yeah, I got some stuff, man, made by Spartan that's made specifically for kennels. And I got a big backpack sprayer, and they got a battery on the back. I mean, I can cover some ground quick, you know, stuff like that, because I do have all these varmint, like, running around.
That statement you just gave, that information you just gave, most people don't know that. They don't know the 15-minute, the time frame. They just feel.
I didn't either.
Right.
Yeah. So the only reason I knew it because somebody told me a long time ago that owned a cleaning company. My friend, he's in pest control. So his thing was he always would come spray my kennels in the evening, and I'm like, man, just get me out the way, And he like, nah, I'll be over there this evening. Well, I never understood why, and he would come and he would spray like after it rains, because in Texas we don't get multiple days of rain. Usually, if we get one rain, we ain't gonna get it no time soon. And he would come and spray like when it would rain, and I'm like, man, it's gonna wash my stuff away. That's my thought. It's not gonna be strong. And he's like, yeah, it will. And he never even really explained it to me until one day I think I pissed him off.
Yeah.
Dummy, it's supposed to stay on a certain time frame. And I'm like, and he's like, yeah, man, it needs to stay on there at least 15. He said 15 to 20 minutes. Or he said 15 to 30 minutes, because it was for flies. That's what I was really, upset about, was the flies. And he would spray some. If it sat there long enough, it would do the job, but it had to sit there. And I wanted them to come spray when it was hot, because that's when the flies were out. You know, they went out when it rained. But I got
And I gotta do like 6 different things for flies. With this dead heat of the summer, I'm doing 6 different things to keep the flies down. It's
flies
crazy.
are universal. No matter what kind of animal you have, right, Kenny?
I actually don't have a fly problem here. Well, I did when they had horses, because I had horses all the way around me, but they're not there anymore. So the fly problem kind of went away, and the chickens eat the flies. So I don't see many flies around here.
Yeah, we're exterminated already.
Yeah.
Last time we talked about worms.
Yeah.
And Kenny, you don't suggest for the chickens worm them too often.
No, I think the chicken breeders are overworming their birds. They have what they call worming programs. They're worming some of them every 2 weeks or every month. Where I don't know about the dogs, but the chickens, it's always good to have some worms in them so they can build the immunity to fight the worms. And whenever you deplete the worms in the bird system, you make it vulnerable to, the exposure of worms. So you need, and the chicken people, they think they have to kill every worm on the bird. Basically, they're poisoning the bird. Those wormers are very toxic. And then on top of that, the wormer gets into the droppings get in the ground and kill the ground. Basically, you won't even see earthworms anywhere near a chicken pen that's been wormed every 2 weeks or every month. So I always tell people, don't worm your birds unless you have to. So if the birds are active, healthy, they're eating real good, then there's no reason to worm them. And if you suspect worms, look at the droppings under the roost in the morning. And if you see actual worms in the droppings, then have an infestation. And then you can go ahead and maybe take care of that, maybe worm them one time. But the idea is not to kill every worm. They're using not only wormers, but they're using copper sulfate, some other harsh, chemicals to kill not only the worms, but the coccidia. Those are things that need to be there for the health of the bird. And when they deplete all of it, they actually are hurting the bird. So
and a bird healthy, Kenny? I'm sorry.
What's that?
So did I hear you right? Coccidia in a bird can be healthy for the bird?
Coccidia in anything is healthy at a certain level. We have coccidia in us. I'm sure your dogs have coccidia in them. But if you kill all the coccidia and they're exposed to coccidia and they're not ready for it, it can actually overwhelm them, especially if the conditions are just right. Then, it's actually worse. So trying to get all the coccidia out of the body would be a bad thing. If we killed the coccidia in us, we would die. We'd actually die. Okay. But coccidia is species specific. So the coccidia in us wouldn't affect your dogs, and the coccidia in your dogs wouldn't affect my chickens. The wild birds wouldn't affect my chickens. They're very specific. But you don't want to kill everything in that animal's body. They need that stuff. Now, worms, I'm not sure about when it comes to dogs, but it's very common to have some worms in a bird. It's just that you don't want them to be infested. And also, I don't know about dogs, but usually when a bird's infested with coccidiosis or worms or lice or mites, there's usually an underlying problem there. That bird has a weakness. A lot of times it's just one bird that seems to get that, and the rest of the birds are fine. So I would just cull that bird, get rid of the problem bird and just leave the rest of them alone. I wouldn't get excited unless I saw the whole pen was filled with it. And usually you don't see that. They usually are infested because they have something else going on with them. They have a weakness. They don't have the resistance that they should have. There's a health problem. So getting rid of the birds that are unhealthy, the ones that are infested with parasites, a lot of times you're actually building the disease resistance throughout the strain, and overall they're going to be healthy. So instead of, I'm not a big medication guy. I'm more of a cull the sick birds and keep the healthy ones and breed the healthy ones. And in time, and even for coccidiosis, and eventually you'll have a disease resistant strain that can withstand, what it's exposed to in its yard. Now, if I take my birds to your yard and you have chickens, will something happen? Well, if it's not exposed properly to the diseases your birds are carrying, then I'm going to have a problem. So all I'm really trying to do is get them resistant to the disease that's in their environment. So I always tell people when I give birds away, I don't sell birds much anymore, quarantine them, get them used to your environment slowly, and then make sure that I don't have a disease in my birds that they're carrying that I don't see that could expose your birds. So quarantine them for 30 days, put a sacrificial bird with them to see what happens. If nothing happens, you're probably good to integrate them into your yard. But to kill those things, actually you're doing more harm than good, and they don't understand that.
So, Joe, how do you consider your worming of your dogs when it comes to like maybe your puppies?
So, my puppies, they on a strict schedule, but usually this is what I do. About 10 days out, I'm not gonna call the medication because I know I be getting my Safeguard and my parental mixed up. But what I would do with the about 10 days before she will give birth, I worm her 10 days in a row. So that will allow like any worms not to go through the placenta. And so when they usually they don't have worms when they're born that way.
Dogs have that much problems with worms?
Well, this is the thing. Yeah, they can. Yeah. They can. And then you have stuff that mosquitoes are enemy of ours because they can bring us stuff. So once the dog is fully grown, you can look in their stool for worms, but another issue we have is heartworms, right, Lamont? So what I do is a dual ivermectin pancure little dual paste thing that's for horses, and I'm worming more in the be straight up in the summer in the warmer months. In the winter, I don't really give a damn because all the insects down, things like that. But yeah, more in the summer months, I'm watching for worms, just because it takes 3 months for a heartworm to form, right? Before it start doing damage. So if I figure like if I could hit them before every 3 months, they can't form up. That's my opinion. And every time I go to the vet, when they get tested, I don't ever have heartworms or none of that stuff.
No, it's a different method to worm when it comes to dogs. When you stated that you worm your pregnant females that many times going into their delivery, that's not something I would ever do, and that's just because I guess we take preventatives before we breed. We make sure that they're clear prior to them breeding, so you can breed. We worm prior to them being bred, and then about 7 days, 7-8 days before they're to deliver, we might worm them at that point. The old way of doing it was to worm a puppy at 2, 4, 6, and 8 weeks. You have a lot of newer vets that would say you don't have to worm them that much. Truthfully, a 2-week-old puppy, about the only way they'll get infected with worms is by the mom. So usually if that mom is worm free, that puppy is pretty much worm free. Where you'll start to see worms is in a pup is between the 4 to 6 week mark, because you're weaning off a mom, you're taking them away. You start to introduce different things to them, feces, in a litter box, or those kind of things that kind of contribute to that. Kenny, when you were talking about coccidia in puppies is detrimental. What the range is that is healthy, I'm not going to claim that I know. I just know if my puppies get coccidia, it spreads through that litter very quickly, and you can lose puppies really quick, especially depending on the breed that you have. Different breeds.
What kind of medication are you using for that?
Usually they use a panicure. They also use uh, medicine called Albon.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so you're basically using a coccidostat. You're not using a coccidicide. So basically what it does, it doesn't kill the coccidia, it just knocks the levels down. You don't want to kill all of it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And
Okay.
that's why
Yeah.
And the same thing with chicks. We can lose a lot of chicks through coccidiosis. But by coccidiosis is it's a disease. You know, it can get out of hand, and certain environments can create it or make it happen or make it worse. But by using, for us, good farm management, by managing the farm, managing the litter, keeping it dry, and all that kind of stuff, we avoid the effects of coccidiosis. So
Right.
it's actually more of a management problem than it. What's that?
It's the clean. It usually I find when they're in clean environments, you usually
Yep.
don't have that issue. I see when I have coccidia, or if I see that problem arise, it's usually when I have a very large litter. If I have a
Yep.
litter of 12, 13, 14 puppies, and now everybody's boo-booing at one time and everybody's stepping in it. And now if you don't use feeders to where they can't actually get their feet in it, one thing that works well with me, and this is a hidden secret, is me using poultry water dishes, poultry feeders, because they can't actually get their feet in it, and they actually have to eat and drink right there in those feeders. Whereas you see most people with dogs, they use pans. They put big pans out. If they got a large litter, they put big amounts out there and they let them free feed. Then you have some that separate in different sections, different bowls, and they put each puppy in. But even with those, little puppies have a tendency to step over into it because I'm not tall enough and the pan is here. I'm going to step on up in it and eat it. Well, if they just walk through something, that could increase that level as well. So those things, they work well for me to keep those little, things like coccidia down to the minimum, which you can't get rid of them. And if you're going to breed, you have to understand that there are just things that comes along with it. Having the knowledge to treat it, fix it, help it is a must if that's what you're going to call yourself and if that's what you're going to do. So I'll never tell the lie that I'm not a person who's had the worms. It kills me when I hear a person say, I've been breeding for years, I've never had the worm. Well, I don't know what kind of breeding you've been doing, because it's definitely not, normal breeding that you don't have any issues whatsoever. But the dogs, they do tend to have a worming problem, Kenny, depending on what time of the year, I would say. And depending there, the kind of litter that is whelped only in the home or inside, totally. Maybe with drainage, with, concrete areas that can be sanitized daily. If you're actively, raising pups outside, that they're actually exposed to the elements of what they have to deal with, it's a little more difficult to kind of keep those things at bay. But to me, when they get a certain age, my dogs go outside. They're exposed because of the breed that I have, and I want them to be confident. At 6 weeks old, this lady, she came at me one day because I had my 6-week-old puppies out by my creek. They have been vaccinated. They have been wormed. But I like to imprint my puppies early, and I imprint the old way. They're going to be exposed to big dogs. They're going to be exposed to noise. They're going to stand by the motorcycle while I ram it, and those kind of things, because I don't want fearful animals. I want very confident pups to go into people's homes. So the way I imprint might not be the way a lady that lives in a cul-de-sac imprints. I have the benefit of imprinting a little differently, and that's in the woods. That's they follow me through the woods, through the pond, those kind of things. So doing it my way, I have to make sure that my covering of them health-wise started early, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we bypass a lot of that stuff if we select hens with good mitochondrial DNA. That
Absolutely.
ensures us that we're going to breed and raise and develop. If they're growing and developing really well, then we can assume that the hen has really good mitochondrial DNA. If she has good mitochondrial DNA, she's going to pass maternal antibodies to the offspring. It's like a circle that, if you do it properly, it builds on itself. It's when you're selecting hens for breeding that are in poor health themselves, not active, listless. They don't pass great mitochondrial DNA or maternal antibodies to their offspring, and then that's when we see the disease. That's when we see more worms. That's when we see coccidiosis. You know, so it's all in the selection of your brood fowl.
It's funny you said that. The other day, the lady she came and she's a breeder. She said, Lamont, why do you have your dogs outside if you have the ability to put them inside? And my response to her was, I want my stock to develop a certain kind of toughness. I want them
Yep.
to be able to pass on certain things in my lines. She didn't get it. She absolutely she
Yeah.
absolutely didn't get it. The words that you use versus the words that I use, they mean the same. You just give the the official
Yeah.
terminology about it. But when it comes to developing a dog, I want a dog that's durable. I want a dog that doesn't have limitations.
Right.
And when it comes to how I do things, my dogs, when it's a guardian breed, it should be able to pass off certain things in its line. And those things are only developed by living a certain way.
Yep.
We do protection training. We try to encourage people to balance it in the sense of put the dog in a tougher situation, meaning don't have him laying on the couch all day in the AC and the heat. If it's cold outside, you got him in the heat. If it's hot outside, you got him in the air. And they don't necessarily understand it, but my thing is this: if I'm in the home and I have a home protector, where is my threat coming from? Outside.
Yep.
Well, if that dog can't relate to outside, he's probably not going to be a superior home protector. And those things are only developed by experiencing it. So you have to put them in a position to experience it. Okay.
Yeah.
I might get in trouble with that, because that's not everybody.
Oh no, I totally agree. I will not baby my birds. I don't give them medications. If they can't survive on my yard, they don't belong here.
Don't you
So
say that.
no, I'm a firm believer that if they can't survive on my yard under the conditions in this environment, then they're not going to be here. I'm not going to medicate them. I'm not going to, I'm going to feed them as good as I can. They're going to have shelter, that kind of thing. But I want them to be exposed to the elements. I don't want to have to baby them. If they can't survive here, they're going to pass poor offspring, and then I'm going to be in trouble. So I won't do that.
Absolutely. So I have a male that's my male, and he does it all. His name is Vulcan. He hunts hogs. He does child daycares. He teaches dog education. He goes to senior living facilities. He does protection. He does obedience. He does it all. Okay. Well, I was trying to get one of his young sons started on a hog. He just couldn't figure it out. I said, well, let me go get your dad in. He can show you how it's supposed to be done. So when I went and got his dad, he went in there exactly how he was supposed to. His son seen him and he started to follow suit, correct? Well, he said, man, he's too valuable. Why would you take that chance of him going in there with that hog? I said, because if he can't go in there with that hog, he's not what I need.
Right.
That doesn't make sense to some people, but people that truly understand it, they get it. Meaning, he's done some great things. He continues to do great things. But at the end of the day, he still needs to be what he is, because I wouldn't put him in a position at a certain time in his life. Vulcan's not going to be doing hogs at 9 years old, 8 years old. But when he's 4.5 and he's in his prime, he needs to still be able to do that. Why? Because there's certain things I want to pass on in my lines that he needs to be able to show still at a certain level. And they just thought I was just insane for taking the chance of losing such a valuable dog. But the reason he's so valuable is he has it in him to make sure he's able to do what he's called to do. He doesn't have limitations. And I won't coddle my dogs to meet today's standards of what fur moms, and fur dads call for us to do. That's just not how I want my program to be. I want my program to stand on something with substance, and the only way you can have that substance, you got to get out and make them prove what they are.
I think a lot of breeders, they don't understand the value of progeny testing the progeny, for the purpose for which they were bred. And it's like you said, if they're protecting them or they're trying to making sure they don't get hurt or there's no problems, then are they really showing you what they need to maybe be used as brood fowl in the future? But I see more people getting in trouble with that. They're breeding animals or breeding birds that aren't meant to be bred. They shouldn't be breeding them at all. And I think progeny testing is a really important part of it. Absolutely.
So, but
yeah.
Hey, I wanted to go back and clear up something I said, because the viewers, they're gonna get in the comment section. What you say, man? But we was talking about the worming the nursing mother. And I said something about 2, 4, 6. I would worm the puppy at 2, 4, 6, and 8 if I hadn't wormed the nursing mother.
Gotcha.
So if I wormed the nursing mother, I would worm them pups at 6 weeks.
Right.
And that'll cut down on a lot of medication going on.
Right.
And then too, I was listening somewhere about a lot of people kind of overdo it on medication for its vaccinations. I know a couple people, I'm gonna hit it again with some more, but a lot of people don't understand that the mother, she has antibodies that's still working in those puppies. Right. So you want to get the vaccinations right. You don't want to overdo it.
And because vets are expensive, and most of the time when chickens get sick, they're chronic. They really don't ever get well. I mean, and a lot of people are giving antibiotics. They see a storm coming, they give all their birds antibiotics thinking that they can prevent the disease. Antibiotics don't prevent disease. They actually work on the disease that the birds have. And so they're destroying the gut. They're using, we were talking about a worming program, but they're also using antibiotic program when they don't need to. Like I don't use any antibiotics at all, ever.
You've done bred for resistance,
disease resistance, and I keep good biosecurity. I don't let those kind of things get on my yard. We have peddlers. We call them peddlers because all they're doing is selling a lot of chickens, and they're just bringing on new birds all the time. They're crossing everything, so they got all kinds of diseases. So what they'll do is they'll do a video on all the diseases they happen to be taking care of, and I can't even tell you how many medications they're listing. They have everything, every medication you can think of for every disease that exists. Okay. And they're just pumping medications left and right into this. And one of the guests on my show, he's a regular. He's actually a poultry veterinarian. His name's Dr. Gallardo. We talk about this a lot on how we call it antibiotic use and misuse, that everybody's trying to use antibiotics to not only prevent disease, but they've got so much disease on their yard that they're just pumping these things into them all the time, and the detrimental effects of it. Pretty soon, the antibiotics that are out there, and there's not very many of them, aren't going to work here pretty soon. And they don't get that. So, and that's what I teach You know, my wife says every time I'm helping somebody or do a coaching call or somebody calls me for help or we do a show, it's cull. You got a sick bird? I don't want to hear anymore. Just cull it. You know, that type of thing. She's always saying, you can't tell everybody to cull their birds. I go, that's my go-to. That's the only way you're going to take care of the problem, because even when you medicate them, it doesn't really fix the problem. It may knock the symptoms down for a while, but before you know it, they're chronic and they're actually showing it again. And so if you can start by getting rid of all the sick birds, breed to the healthy ones, in time, you're not going to have to deal with this. There was a time when in the early days, when I had maybe 15 strains, more than I could manage. I wasn't making any progress. My mentor came over and he started looking over my birds, and I had a lot of sick birds. And he goes, oh, you got to cull that thing. I go, no, I got it taken care of. He goes, what do you mean? I got the medications. I got this taken care of. I was proud. I thought I had it all handled. He goes, let me see the medications you have. He started throwing each one of them into the trash can. And he goes, you can't medicate yourself out of a problem. He goes, you're going to need to cull the sick birds, breed the healthy ones, and you're going to thank me. Well, I thought I made a big mistake, because I did exactly what he said. I started culling anything that was sick. It seemed like I was culling most of my birds at first. Every year it got better. It took about 5 or 6 years, to the point when I wasn't seeing sick birds on my yard anymore. And it's been like that ever since. I rarely ever see a sick bird. But the way I was going, he was right. I had like a hospital. I was trying to cure everything. And those birds never amounted to anything. They never really had what it took to actually advance the strain. So I just started getting rid of breeds. I started getting the worst one, get rid of that one. And what was the next worst one? I got down to where I had 3 strains, and I went with those for a while. And that's when I started making progress. I stopped using the medications. I downsized the number of strains I had in my yard, and everything just got better from there. And a lot of my members like, okay, I'm going to trust you. And they were scared to do it, but they did exactly what I did. And within a few years, they were seeing progress, and they're thanking me for it. So I know that's probably not something you guys do for dogs, but that's how we need to do. That's what we should do when it comes to chickens, for sure.
Well, a lot of it wouldn't work that way with dogs, because usually you don't find breeders that are truly dedicated to doing this for years. Most people can't see themselves doing it for 15 years. They can't see themselves for doing it 20 years or 30 years, because most of them want the money right now. And that takes away some of them's ability of doing it the best way. Not necessarily the right way, the best way. Because most of them are going to do it the right way right now. They'll do the simple things that people are told to look for in a good breeder, but ultimately they won't find a dog that had epilepsy out of a litter and then wipe out all 14 of those dogs that come from that line. They're not going to do it.
Yeah,
they're not. I'm just being honest. And that what you're talking about, it's going to be far and few. I have a friend that she had an issue like that. She spayed and neutered every male and female she had. She said, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to take the chance. Boy, you talking about a person I was praise over. Because they won't do it. And I know a gentleman, his dog was one of the first to hit Westminster in the Corso breed, and he's on everybody's pedigree, and this dog has flooded the market with epilepsy. You better not tell him to get rid of his lines. Even though they keep seeing it, they just won't, because it's not profitable for them to do it. And they can't see themselves doing it 20 years. It's kind of like the 3 gentlemen that I took on as kennel partners. One of my thing was, if you just know you're going to do this for a little bit to grab a little money, just do it, but I don't want to be a part of it. If you can see yourself 5, 7, 9 generations down the line, that's going to take you 20 years. I'm with you. I'll do my best to teach you as much as I can. And what you're saying is just commendable, because weeding, to me, nature does that. Nature, it weeds out the weak. And, and humans, we take that as, oh, you are heartless. Well, guess what? That same bird or that same dog is not going to live in nature for whatever reason, whether it's the pack taking him out, or the weather taking him out, disease taking him out. Something's going to take out that weak one regardless. So how am I a monster? By doing it, because I know back in the day, if you had a litter and that it was 1 or 2 pups in there that was weak, they were taken away at the beginning. They weren't going to take room up from the strong ones getting the milk from the mom. They were out the way. So does that happen very often today, Kenny?
Well, don't get me wrong. I mean, not every chicken breeder, and very few think like I do. Most of them are doing everything they can to keep those birds alive so they can make something on that bird. That bird is at least $50 to them. You know what I mean? They're going to get something. If they can get that bird well enough to sell it, they're going to do it. You know,
and then too, Lamont, sometimes mama will cull them herself.
Absolutely. And we wonder why that one is over to that side of the box. And I put it back on, and then I come back over to the other side of that box. Me being the age I am now and the experience, I understand why it's over it, and it's probably not going to live, and mama don't want it. But then I see things like people trying to say puppies who have a cleft lip that you're having to use the feeding tube. Hey, I'm telling you, they use feeding tubes now to make sure that puppy can eat. It can't suck. It can't take the mom's breast. It can't take a bottle. But now you're putting a feeding tube in it for it to live. What's the quality of life that dog is ultimately going to have? Or when you see dogs that are born with 3 limbs, now you want to get a wheelchair made for the puppy. You know, those are the type of things that I truly don't understand, and I know it's not for the greater good. It's for the greater right now, you know, or maybe it's for a like on Facebook or Instagram, something along that line. But when you talk about breeding practices, I'm still a firm believer that as a breeder, you're supposed to put the best representation of whatever you're breeding out to the world. Because somebody is taking it into their home, or somebody's trying to duplicate what they see you do. And if they're duplicating you doing it half-assed, they're going to continue to pass off the same thing that you're doing.
How important is genetics when it comes to training dogs, Lamont?
I don't think there's anything more important. Because if your genetics is a dumb dog, it ain't going to get much training, or it's only going to make it that much harder for the trainer. I think the number one thing when it comes to training is genetics. That's why you see so many breeders that are working dog driven breed totally different than the show world. The things that they are looking for more than anything are the genetics here and here. Those 2 things, you know. But in the show world, there are different, you know, things that are more important. And when it comes to me training a dog, usually when they get out that car, I can kind of tell what I'm dealing with immediately.
Oh, you know that too? Wow. Okay.
Immediately. When you've done enough, the police officer that dropped off, I hope he doesn't watch this podcast. They weren't genetic driven. So I can always tell, and this is me, you know, sticking my chest out a little bit. I can always tell when I'm training someone else's versus mine. Mine, they say, but I know what he was bred for. I know what my purpose was not only with his parents, but his grandparents and his great grandparents.
Mm-hmm.
And it was passed down. Versus some of the ones that I get now that were bought for the color and they were bought for the size. And Lamont, I'm gonna breed him. And when I get to where, what I will usually do is those people do a group training with some of the people that have, my dogs or other really, really good breeders' dogs. And then they wonder why their dog is here and everybody else's is here. But look wise, they're here. Intelligence wise, they're here. And I'll give me the intelligence over the look any day. Because they have issues.
Right. You got movements against dog breeders. Sometimes you might tell somebody you're a dog breeder and they'll look at you like, you said something about their mama, you know what I mean? So and me personally, man, it's a difference in a purebred dog. I don't want no dog out of shelter. I mean, I hope the dog finds a home and everything, but me personally, I don't want a dog out of shelter. We had those dogs growing up in the neighborhood. Our dad, back in the day, your dad, y'all want a dog, we go down the pound, get one, it might bite your ass.
Wait, you didn't go to the pound and look for your wife.
No, you're right.
Look for a purebred.
So how do you navigate? You're right. So how do you navigate, when you got like these movements that's against people like you? What is your message to them? Why you do what you do?
I don't even know if I can necessarily give them a message that's gonna change any of their thought pattern. I think when people are on movements, I think that they flow with things that support their movement. All I do is just wake up every day and I put my boots on and I try to breed the best, most superior dog I possibly can. And I'm huge, and that this as well as anyone. I'm big on placement. I'm not a breeder that sells to everybody. I probably turn more people down than I take their money. If that dog is the color you want, it's the look you want, but it has a working mentality, and I know your home needs a pet.
Right.
I'm not going to take your money. And at the end of the day, I think that's the responsibility that falls on us when we do call ourselves a breeder and we choose to do it. It's placement. I don't care if it's a horse, a bird, or a snake. If I know truthfully, and I can look at you and we've talked and we've assessed the situation, and I know that dog doesn't fit you or fit in your home, or you're not the kind of person that I want to represent what I do, I'm not going to sell to you.
Right.
So when it comes to people saying, oh, you can just go pay $75 down at the pound, that's fine. I mean, some people buy cars from the auction. I don't knock them for buying at the auction. If that's what, you choose to do and it works for you, so be it. But at the same time, some people, they choose to invest in a person that went a step further when it came to producing what they want. General Motors produces a premier SUV. That's why people go to it, because they want a certain quality. And that's what I think when you talk about the pound versus a breeder that's truly doing his best and doing it right, is the quality.
Gotcha. Okay.
Most breeds that are mutts, true enough, our grandparents had some great ones. My dad would take a mutt canine, but they weren't doing designer dogs.
Right.
They weren't doing sheepoos and all these breeds that here, when you intertwine them, they don't flow the way you would want them to flow. And they're all over the place. They're scattered brain. They pay attention for 10 seconds and now you're redirecting them to something else. We're in a world that we do what we want to do. Doesn't matter if it makes sense or if it makes it better. I wanted to do it, so I did it. I'm gonna take a Frenchie with a bulldog, and neither one of them can breathe, but they the right color. Give me 50,000. You know,
Exotic.
Exotic. That word again, exotic.
Yeah.
But that's when it comes to that. When I have people that say, "Well, I don't like breeders," a lot of them don't understand the work that goes into it either, and most of them couldn't do it or wouldn't do it. You know, not for somebody to simply be happy with what they got from you. You know, that's what I do.
Mm-hmm. Kenny, so I know one thing you talk about is, and what you're trying to teach is more like uniformity in the chicken world. What's frustrating about that, and how what do you suggest to fix it?
Well, I pushed people towards breeding for purity of blood. You're only going to get there if they're uniform and consistent. Okay. The frustrating part is that they're just adding new blood all the time. They're never really trying to create a strain. Every time they run into a problem, they get a bird from somebody and they're always adding new blood into it. We have breeders who say, "Oh, my birds are pure. I only add new blood every 5 or 6 years." Well, no, every 5 or 6 years, you recombinate the genes and change them forever is what you did. You know what I mean? So that would be the most frustrating part, is that there's not a lot of people that are actually working towards purity of blood or actually creating a strain. They just, either they don't understand how it works, or they don't know what to do, or they don't think it's possible, or it's too much work for them. So they're always adding new blood. They're always crossing. All they're doing is mongrelizing the breed. And it just seems like if I have an uphill battle, that's it. Is trying to get people to see it a different way, that creating a strain is possible and it's worth it. You know, I've got hundreds of members in my Breeders' Academy that are seeing that now, and it's that's the gratifying part. So I put almost all my attention into my members on the Breeders' Academy. I don't waste much time on Facebook or the other places, because some people you can't reach. If they're not ready to learn, then nothing you're going to say is going to change their mind. So a lot of times they have to come to you. You can't go to them. They have to kind of come to you. Then they're open for suggestion. They're open for advice. They're open for a new way. That's why I like the Breeders' Academies, because when we do coaching calls or we do shows, you can feel the enthusiasm in my members, and that I feed off of that. So because they're enthusiastic about it, then I'm enthusiastic in teaching them. And because I'm actually they're seeing progress, and I'm seeing the progress that they make. But I think that's it's simple as that. They're just adding new blood. They think it's always greener on the other side of the fence. They think someone else's bird's always going to fix them. Well, if the other person's birds are better than theirs, then scrap yours and go with his, because that's probably the best way to go. You know, right. So yeah.
All right.
So
all right, guys.
Real quick,
go ahead.
Before you end, I'm gonna ask you and Kenny this. We've all seen things being done now that are just kind of like mind blowing when it comes to breeding, when it comes to ethical things that people are doing. Do you feel like, truly, like how you just asked Kenny, well, what can you do to fix it? Do you truly believe it can be fixed, or is the genie out of the bottle?
I think it can be fixed, but and my way is, this is my way. This is my goal. Like, especially like with YouTube and social media, since it's like Kenny mentioned earlier, it's a lot of wives' tales, this and that. My goal, I said, if I can bring experts in and correct and put out information because that's accurate, because a lot of times, what guy on YouTube's like you? Maybe one or two that's been in the Corso 26 years. You know what I'm saying? So my goal is education. You know what I'm saying? And not regurgitation. It makes a difference when this man is known on the ground, like, in our Facebook group, and we got a private Facebook group over in Northwest Arkansas, and I posted that video of Kenny and the guy at Missouri, the Corso breeder, Big Will Velocity, shout out to you, bro. He said Kenny is a legend in the game. He knows that, and things like that. So I think just education will help. Hearing from guys like you making more videos and stuff like that. And even though it might be cause controversy, you can say why I believe this and why, because you guys do have the vast experience, to say what you say. You know what I mean?
I absolutely think it can be fixed. It's like he said, it's all about education. As long as you're not, giving them old wives' tales and superstitions, and you're making common sense, and they can see, the light, then you're going to get there. And the more people you can get to follow you, I look at it like an upside down V, where you start with a few people, and it just expands, and it keeps expanding to the point when the ones that are following the old wives' tale are all of a sudden become the minority. Will it happen overnight? No, it's going to take some time.
Yeah, and then too, I believe you guys should benefit financially from your knowledge to help the next generation. You know what I mean? I really do.
Well, like I said, when I watched the video you guys did together, I was really impressed with Javon's, the way he talked about it, what he said, the common sense that he had. I mean, not only did I notice that it followed, I mean, I could see the similarities between a dog breeder and a chicken breeder. And I thought that was fascinating. But he just made so much sense. And why he doesn't have a website on his own that doesn't teach actual breeding and raising and training, I don't know, because I think he would do pretty well, because there's not a lot of people out there that are actually teaching it properly. After following you guys, I started watching all these dog breeders' videos, and some of them were so far off. Some of them were close, and then they went off the rails later down the road. Some of them were just about there, and then they just, it's like, oh my God, it's like, you guys are having the same problems we are having, where there's only a small number of people actually know what they're talking about that actually could advance the strain or advance the breed. And we're competing with other people that are just saying what everybody wants to hear, whether they know it's wrong or they know it's right or whatever, or they think it's right. And so, yeah, it's an uphill battle. We are competing with people who are teaching it wrongly so that they can make some money. I'm not worried about the money so much. For me, it was always the preservation of the bird. I've been writing for the magazines, probably about a dozen different magazines, all over the world. And it was always that for me. It was always about the preservation of the breed. And then I realized that people just aren't breeding them properly. So then I had to start reaching out and trying to find ways to teach them how to breed properly. And then I created a program called the Founders Program, which is on the Breeders' Academy, and create all kinds of programs and courses to support it. And it just amazed me. People get in there and go, wow, I never knew this. And that's what we need. It's always been the wow factor for me, is to get them in there to see what it's like. And then they can see, they start listening to these other people that teach in other programs. They can see why those programs aren't working and why this one does. And then they start teaching to other people. I think eventually we'll get there. It's not going to happen overnight, though. But.
Right. All right. Any closing remarks, benediction? How do the people get in touch with you?
My name is Lamont Morgan. I own Lapotenza Cane Corso. I'm in Midlothian, Texas. That's the southern sector of Dallas County, in Texas. My phone number is 214-207-6770. You can find Lapotenza on Facebook, also on Instagram. Website is www.lapotenzacanecorso.com. I thank you guys for, allowing me to just participate in this. Hearing Kenny speak, I watched this video with you guys, and it the knowledge is just mind blowing of what one individual can have and pass on in a positive way, without demeaning, the person that doesn't know. And I think that's what we find so much on the internet now is information being passed. Is like, you don't know this and you're doing this, you should know this, versus someone that's truly educating you in a way that, you can learn from and continue to grow. So I'm just, the platform, I think, Joe, that you're giving now, I know it was something that you were nervous about, you were hesitant about, but you just stepped out on faith. And I think it's benefited so many people, because I have a lot of people reaching out to me from the interview that we did. And I'm like, you did what? You watched that whole thing? But
people coming your videos, now Jihad video we did earlier this year is doing numbers, but yours is like, I can already tell by the analytics is going to be number one, and Kenny is trucking up right behind you.
Right. That's crazy to me, because Kenny asked me, well, I don't understand why. Kenny, I don't like doing this. I like,
but Lamont, you talk on that phone. I should say it offline. But hell, I'm gonna do it. You talk on the phone a lot. Every time you pick up your phone with the knowledge you got, you should be getting paid, bro.
Yeah. I've been told that many a day. But I'm gonna say this, it might sound a little crazy. Sometimes I get paid by the man upstairs in a different way, by the life I've lived, and he just keeps blessing me. So, your daddy would be proud of me saying that. Your daddy would be proud of me saying that with him being a pastor. I just sometimes my purpose just serves without necessarily putting the monetary thing behind it. I just love being able to help when I can. But I love them dogs, and I love what I do. And it was a forum, it was about 11 or 12 of us breeders. And some of these guys have been doing it a lot longer than me. They've been doing it 35, 38 years. And they said, well, what would you say to them? I said, I'll tell you this. I line up with any one of y'all. I line up with any one of you when it comes to the intelligence, the structure, the ability to not have limitations in my dogs. I line up with any one of you and I run circles around you. A couple of them said, but you got our dogs. I said, you started with our lines. I said, and I breed them better than you. And it's a joke to us, but it's the truth in my mind, because I know what I focus on every day. And it's not always public based on what's popular now. I try to stay true to what I know is right. And it's kind of just like Kenny said, you got to do it right, period. It's a period at the end of that. So like I said, I thank you guys for, just taking the time to sit down with me. And if anyone ever needs some help, whether it's training, and that's any breed, I'll train anything. If it got 4 paws, teeth, and a tail, I'll train it. But if you think you need some help in the Corso side of things, feel free to reach out. I'm not hard to find. I'm all over the internet now, unfortunately, because now Kenny done said something. I know I'm in. Everybody listen to Kenny. So, I just thank you, man. And Kenny, it was a pleasure to even just sit down with a person like yourself. And I learned some stuff today. Whether I went into that goal or not, but I always love to learn. So, if I reach out, I need me 4 chickens. It ain't deep.
You got the room. You got the room, though, don't you?
My friend is trying to get me into chickens as we speak. I don't know if I got the time. I don't know if I got.
Yeah.
This has been fun. I really appreciate the great words. And I think you're a great teacher. I think if you took it seriously and really got into it, I think you do really well. And I do think Joe's doing a great job with this show, and I think it's going to get better and better. I think he's doing a good thing, or I wouldn't be here. But people can reach me. Well, first of all, they can watch my show Bred to Perfection on YouTube. My channel is Kenny Troiano. And we also have a podcast called Bred to Perfection. You can go to my website, www.breedersacademy.com. And that's my free site. That's the one you'll reach. You can sign up for my free newsletter. And hopefully, eventually, you'll want to be a member of the Breeders Academy. That's where I teach you how to create strains, improve your strains, maintain the strains. We have a great program called the Founders Program. We got a lot of programs and courses on the website. We have a video series called the Masters Class Video. We do roundtable videos or members roundtables with our members once a week. We just have a lot of great things there. I have members of all types, not just chickens, which is my specialty, but we have dog breeders, we have goat breeders, anything you can think of. We even have fish breeders on there, and it's a method that works for all animals, yeah, just check us out on Bread's Perfection. Listen to our show, see if it's something that you're interested in. Go sign up for the newsletter, and hopefully I'll meet you at the Breeders Academy. But I had a great time with you guys. I learned a lot too. Javon's, like I said, his information's right on, and there's just not very many people out there teaching really good information. I want to pull my hair out when I listen to some people that they're passing all this misinformation. If we had more people like Javon out there, I think it would be a better place, and our animals and our breeds would be in a better place too. So yeah, I really appreciate you guys inviting me. I had a good time.
All right, man. All
Good
right,
job.
well, that wraps. Yeah. All right. Y'all, everybody know where to find me. So,
And that wraps up another episode of NWA Cane Corsos. Thank you for being a part of our Cane Corso community. Remember, you can stay connected with us beyond the podcast. Find us on all major media platforms by searching for NWA Cane Corsos. Whether it's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or YouTube. Just hit that follow button to join the conversation and get the latest updates. If you have a burning question or want to apply to be a guest on our show, we'd love to hear from you. Simply shoot us an email at nwacanecorsos@gmail.com. And if you're a business interested in becoming a sponsor, reach out to us at the same email address. For more resources, exclusive content, and links to all our social media profiles, visit our website at nwacanecorsos.com. It's your go-to destination for everything dogs. Thank you once again for tuning in, and we can't wait to bring you more exciting episodes where we explore the fascinating world of dogs.